Hello there, friends and followers, and welcome to this Microsoft Flight Simulator video. Today, we are going to be taking a look at an add-on called Flight Simulator First Officer Next. The main purpose of Flight Simulator First Officer Next is to simulate the role of a first officer aboard the aircraft. The add-on has support for several aircraft, including the FlyByWire A320. Which is going to be the subject of our video today. We are currently situated at Dalaman Airport in Turkey, and for the purposes of our review, we are going to be performing a real-world flight aboard Turkish Airlines Flight 7593 service to Ankara. Let's get started. First, let's take a look at the add-on and its features. First Officer Next is available for purchase at the Sim Market store. Link to the add-on will be provided in the description section of the video. Once you have downloaded, installed, and launched the add-on, you will be presented with this rather simple user interface. It's quite a feature-rich program and lightweight, and so I appreciate the simplicity of the user interface. At the very top here, this is a context menu that gives you access to additional menu items and features, as well as your license and configuration manager. The boxes here represent the actual flows and checklists to operate the Airbus A320. This box here contains important ACARS messages about the connectivity of the add-on to the flight simulator, as well as important instructions for the pilot flying to perform during the flight. The Auto Flows button is simply a button that automates the checklists. You can toggle this on and off based on your liking. The Performance button contains additional takeoff and landing information required for your first officer to properly configure the aircraft. The status messages at the bottom of the user interface. The first one here indicates that the add-on is linked successfully to the flight simulator. The status of the aircraft: we are currently on the ground, and the aircraft we're flying is the FlyByWire A320. One thing I do appreciate about First Officer Next is got a voice capability where you can start checklist and confirm checklist items, as well as give additional instructions to your first officer using voice command. The first thing you need to do before start using the add-on is to click on the context menu here and head over to the license manager to activate your product. To do this, simply select the FlyByWire or the product that you've purchased from the Sim Market store from the drop-down menu. In our case, we're going to use the FlyByWire A320. Simply enter your license key, your email address, and click on Activate Product. We are now ready to use First Officer Next for the FlyByWire A320. Next, we're going to take a look at the Configuration Manager, which gives you access to change the standard operating procedures and additional configuration items. As you can see here, those are the functions that the first officer will perform. You can toggle them on or off. Additionally, you can indicate whether these systems are available aboard the aircraft: auto brake, APU, GPU, and this is a passenger flight. Another nice feature in First Officer Next is the ability to integrate with SimBrief. It has the ability to download your flight plan automatically to save you some time. Next, we need to provide some takeoff and landing data to our first officer so that he can properly configure the aircraft. To do this, we're going to click on Performance. We are connected to SimBrief, and we can simply click on Get Flight Plan and download the flight plan from SimBrief. Please note that SimBrief will populate most of these fields, but we need to manually enter the fuel, and we need to indicate whether the flight plan has a SID. You have to also select the flap setting for your flight. We are doing flaps 1. Please note that when you're flying the CRJ, for example, you need to indicate number 2 for flaps 8. So this setting here actually indicates the number of detents, flap detents, that are required. The landing information: the airport and the arrival runway is 03 right. and the minimums is something you need to set. We're going to be doing flaps full, and we'll update VREF once we are airborne. And now we are ready to begin our flows. In order to begin the automated flows, the first thing we need to do is connect external power, and we need to make sure that the aircraft door is open.
Good afternoon, Captain.
As you can see, the first officer just greeted us as we have both the external power and the aircraft door open. The first officer will now be performing the pre-flight flow, and the first thing is the safety check, and then of course he will establish the power. As you can see now, we can see the flight instruments, and so the first officer is performing the needed safety checks before we establish power to the aircraft. This appears to be a bug in the program. It says GPU is not available where it's going to start the APU. So the first officer has now started establishing power using the APU while the aircraft is actually powered. So that's a bug in the software that needs to be addressed. The time to the next action performed by the first officer is displayed here. As you can see here, we have 169 seconds before the next item starts. Check APU before proceeding. Alright, the APU looks good to me, so we're going to go ahead and skip this part. And now, as you can see, the message displays APU power started. And now the first officer is continuing with his flows. Performing the fire test. And as the first officer is performing the required test, there is a message here that says pilot flying, enter ADIRS data. The first officer has now gone for the walk around, and the pilot flying is supposed to enter the flight information. So we're going to head over to the MCDU, and we're going to go first to the ATSU and enter the load. The flight plan and payload information have been successfully entered into the aircraft flight management computer. We are now ready for the next step.
We're ready to go. Looks like we picked a good day to fly.
And now the first officer will continue setting the barrel selector, as you can see here, checking the McDo pages, as you can see. And he will also set the transponder.
Preflight checklist. Cockpit preparation. Completed. Passenger signs.
Now the first officer is waiting for the pilot flying to confirm this checklist item. You can either click on the control button to confirm the checklist item, or simply say on with the voice command.
On ADIRS. Set fuel 5970 kilogram. Checked. FMGS. Set. Altimeters. Set. Checklist complete.
And now, as you can see, we see the pre-flight checklist is completed, and now we can begin the before start flows. As you can see now, we're hearing the cabin crew announcement to our passengers indicating that we are ready for push and start. The next item on our list is the before start checklist. So let's go ahead and start it.
Before start checklist. Doors. Closed. Beacon. On. Parking brake.
And now the before start checklist is completed. We can start our engines. Let's go ahead and push the aircraft out of our position. Alright, we have now started our pushback, and we can start our engines. I'm going to click on engines here, starting the engines, and once we do so, you will notice that the first officer has put the engine mode selector on start, and we're going to start with the engine number 2 first. As you can see now, first officer next has displayed the current total payload, dry weight of the aircraft, 0 fuel, gross weight, as well as the fuel weight of the aircraft.
All engines stable.
And now, as you can see, the engines are stabilized, and now we can begin the after start flow. And now the after start flow is completed. We're ready for the taxi checklist.
Taxi checklist. Flight controls. Checked. Trim. Checked. Briefing. Completed. Flaps. Set. FMA takeoff data. Checked. Transponder. Set. Checklist complete.
Parking brake released. Let's head over to runway 01 for departure.
From the flight deck, this is your first officer. I wanted to take a moment to welcome you aboard. As you probably already noted by looking out the window, we have some pretty fair weather with us.
As we approach runway 01 for departure, let's go ahead and notify cabin crew and perform the takeoff check. There are no blues.
Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff.
And let's go ahead and call for the before takeoff checklist.
Before takeoff checklist. Engine mode selector. Set. Tax. Set. ECAM memo. Checked. Checklist complete.
Right, as you can see, the first officer is now configuring the aircraft lights, and the before takeoff checklist is now complete. Right, we are now lining up runway 01 for departure, and let's go.
Thrust set. Checked. Speed alive. Checked. 80 knots. Checked.
Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff.
V1, rotate. V2. Positive rate, gear up. Landing gear up. 400 feet, heading select. VNAV.
Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff.
Acceleration altitude, autopilot.
And we are now climbing to our cruise altitude of 35,000 feet, and everything's looking good.
Flaps up.
All right, let's perform the after takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. Landing gear. Up and off. Flaps. Up. No lights. Spoilers. Off. Checklist complete.
And the after takeoff checklist is now complete. As you can see now, the ACARS message has updated arrival times. The destination is 280 nautical miles. Remaining time is 1 hour and 5 minutes.
Transition
and the,
altitude.
Local time
Check.
is Zulu
Transition
time.
altitude.
Right, we need to set bearer reference to
Check.
standard.
Passing 10,000 feet.
And as you can see, the first officer has turned off the landing lights as we pass 10,000 feet. All right, folks, we now continue our climb to 35,000 feet, and we will check back again with first officer next as we approach our cruise level.
Altitude. The air looks pretty good up here, so we're going to go ahead and turn off the seatbelt signs. However, for those of you who remain in your seats, please keep your seatbelts fastened as turbulence is unpredictable. For now, though, just sit back and enjoy the ride. We'll talk to you when we get closer to our destination.
As you can see, Flight Officer next has passenger announcements for the different phases of flight. We are now cruising at our final cruise altitude of 35,000 feet. And the ACARS message has now updated the arrival information. As you can see, top of descent in 78 nautical miles and 171 nautical miles for our destination. 22 minutes remaining. Again, very useful information. And we are going to configure our destination information, the McDo, and then we'll wait for top of descent to begin our descent into Ankara Airport in Turkey.
Descent checklist. Decision height. Set. Engine mode selector. Set. Checklist complete. Approaching top of descent.
From the flight deck again, as you've already noted, we're well into our descent, about 40 nautical miles from the airport. We're not anticipating any delays, so we should have you on the ground in about 20 minutes or so. So if you wouldn't mind, just sit back, relax, and keep that seatbelt fastened, and we'll have you on the ground shortly.
Right, the descent checklist is complete. Let's go ahead and initiate descent. We have begun our descent, and as you can see, the first officer has configured anything, and the actual add-on has downloaded the weather at our destination, which is again a really nice feature, that everything is in sync in the different phases of flight. So now we have the weather at Ankara, and we can see 250, we can see 2206 knots, a few clouds at 1100, scattered at 25, broken at 800. The current temperature is 6 Celsius, and the QNH is 1007. And you will notice that the first officer will also set the barometer reference once we are at the transition altitude. And as you have heard, as we approach 10,000 feet, another passenger announcement to remind our passengers to turn off their mobile phones.
Passing 10,000 feet.
And as soon as we've passed 10,000 feet, the first officer has configured the lights for our approach. Runway turn-off lights, landing lights, and taxi light, nose to takeoff.
2,500.
And as you can see now, we are ready to lower the landing gear. Let's select gear down.
Landing gear down.
Speed check, flaps 2.
Flaps up.
Again, the same problem with the first officer indicating that flaps are up when the flaps are not up. Time for the landing checklist.
Landing checklist. Cabin. Notified. Go round altitude. Set. ECAM memo. Checked. Checklist complete.
Flight attendants prepare for landing.
We are now on final approach, and as you can see, the weather is less than perfect here at Ankara. Some heavy rains and clouds, but we should be fine. 1,000 feet, let's go ahead and disconnect the autopilot.
1,000.
And my aircraft.
500.
Autopilot.
400. 300.
Minimums.
200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. 5.
Breed brake out. Manual braking. Reverse thrust. 100 knots. 80 knots. 60 knots. Reverse idle.
Dear passengers, welcome to our destination airport. Please remain seated until all docking procedures are performed in cabin.
And as you can see, the first officer has performed all the after landing flows.
To our destination. We'll be taxiing for a few moments, so please stay seated with your seatbelts fastened. For the weather, it's dry but cold outside, so you might want to have your jackets ready when you exit the aircraft. Once again, thanks for flying with us, and we hope to see you on a future flight.
And welcome to Ankara International. Now we can begin with the shutdown flow. And as you can see, the first officer has now shut down the aircraft engines.
Shutdown checklist. APU bleed.
You can see that the APU bleed is now turned on.
Set Y electronic pump. Off engines. Off passenger signs. Off exterior lights. As required. Parking brake. Set transponder. Set weather radar. Off. Checklist complete.
My final remarks on Flight Simulator First Officer Next for Microsoft Flight Simulator is that it's a well-developed add-on. It does add that level of immersion and realism to the flying experience. However, it does come with a number of glitches that needs to be ironed out. In my view, this add-on is worth its price. Although it's got some glitches that need ironing out, I still believe that it is an enjoyable add-on and delivers on what it promises to do. Well folks, this is pretty much what I wanted to share with you in this video. I hope that you've enjoyed this review video of Flight Simulator First Officer Next for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you all very soon. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.